Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Payments Leaders Show. On the Payments Leaders Show, what we're about is exploring the opportunities in this wonderful industry, which is presenting us so many opportunities and raising all boats by making money easier to move, money easier to use and to invest in as well. And on this show, you know that the most important thing for us is embracing opportunities before we look at the challenges. And we love having leaders on who do exactly that. So delighted today to welcome Sara Savidge. Welcome.
Hey, Adrian. Good to be here.
Well, thank you very much indeed for taking time out of what I know is a very, very busy schedule. And I'm particularly thrilled today to have Sara on the show because, as will be revealed, there's so much to her story that I find inspiring, and I know others will do as well. She's a great mentor and advocate as well of people. So, without further ado, I wonder if you could tell us a bit about your background and your current role.
Yeah, of course, Adrian. So, Sara Savidge, I lead and have the responsibility for the international payments business within FexCo. I've worked within the payments industry for, I'd say, probably around 25, nearly 30 years. Yes, I was very young when I started in payments back in Barclays many, many moons ago. I'm also on the advisory board for the EMEA Women in Payments Global Community, a self-proclaimed and self-confessed payment geek. Supporting many different forums, Adrian, across the fintech payments ecosystem, as well as a real focus. I'm quite passionate about driving inclusion, making sure that we are a little more diverse than perhaps maybe we were when I first started in payments many, many moons ago. And I guess more broadly, trying to drive innovation across the industry.
Excellent, excellent. Yeah, it's interesting. We were at a conference together recently, and I say I sort of know quite a lot of people in the payments industry and organizations. And you mentioned Fexco, and I was like, oh, I haven't come across that name. And then you brought it to life for us. I wonder if you could tell us a little bit more about Fexco.
Yeah, so I think the example I gave whilst up on stage at the Payments Leaders Summit, Adrian, was, have you travelled in the last
Yeah,
6 months? And if you had, the chances are, if you were given the opportunity to convert back to your local currency, the chances are that Fexco has underpinned that. So we've been pioneering in the payments industry for the last 40 years or so. And I guess when I think back, the fintech badge back in the late 80s, early 90s really didn't exist. But essentially, Fexco plays a key part within the ecosystem. As mentioned, we process around 37 billion in euro value transactions each and every year. We've got around 3,000 colleagues supporting customers, operations, financial institutions, and merchants of all sizes in more than 50 countries across the globe as well. And I guess one of our strap lines here is, wherever you send, whether you receive, exchange, or make a payment, you'll find Fexco. We've also got managed and advisory services along with new ventures and innovation as we continue to support trailblazers across the industry by co-creating, investing, and providing an environment for the future across all industries, no matter where we are. We've always been a pretty broad and diverse group in terms of the markets which we operate, the industries that we serve, and the solutions that we provide. However, one thing that's consistent, Adrian, across the entire Fexco organisation is the commitment that we have to delivering great outcomes for our partners and for our clients. It's right at the very heart of absolutely everything that we do.
Brilliant, brilliant. Well, I think that's something I've always known about you, as being passionately about customer obsessed and also partner obsessed, etc. So I wonder if we could start really with you use one of those people I would describe as a passionate payments person. So where did you tell us about that? Where did that passion come from?
Yeah, so Adrian, I was a spirited second child, right? Pretty,
Okay.
pretty much resisted every bit of advice that anybody with any sense could have given me at an early age, and that kind of generally centered around things like hairstyles and maybe boyfriends as well, right? So we won't go there. But I kind of fell into a role with Barclays. Say I left school with very little qualifications, just a real passion and zest for life. And I got a role at Barclays working in Maidstone in Kent. And that was really the first time that I had touched financial services, right at the tender age of 16. My role there was pretty much doing everything from kind of sealing up statement envelopes and posting them right the way through to encoding RENs and CCOs for those of us that have been in the industry for a wee while. And from there, I guess I found a love for sales. I found a love for delighting customers, and was given some great opportunities to move into a sales role as a personal banker, mortgage advisor, and really found that I really loved to dig down and really understand what customers needed, and then took the solutions that we had in Barclays to try and work out how we could solve for those customers. And at every single span, whether it was a loan or a mortgage, or moving through into sort of account relationship thereafter. I then moved into the merchant services division, and that's when really my payments career started to take off. So I had the delights of covering the East End and Southeast of London for Barclays Merchant Services, selling the little PDQ terminals and zip-zap machines. You remember those? Only too well, right? And you know, the patch itself was very diverse. Everything from high-risk home traders right the way through to the dot-com bubble, which was really starting to inflate back in the 90s, the late 90s, and having all sorts of opportunities come to us from across the pond over in the US, as well as really kind of trying to see how we could take some of the traditional payments processing landscape and moving to new sectors, like, for example, the gambling industry, you know, kind of looking at certain specialist sectors as well. And I think because the Southeast and East End of London was so diverse and was kind of a little bit of a breeding ground for innovation and technology, I found that I really had an interest for e-commerce, right? And from there, I went through a number of different roles, went up the ranks within Barclays. But I guess, you know, when you work away from home an awful lot, you're traveling, although you love the role that you do, if you've got two small kids in tow, it's quite difficult to get that work-life balance and be all the things that you want to be as a you know, really strong performer at work, but also your main role as a mum and a provider at home. It's difficult to get that balance. And my husband, back in the early 2000s, was offered a role and an opportunity here in Ireland, which is where I'm based, although the accent would not suggest that. I still retain my Kentish tones. So we upped sticks and we moved to Ireland back in 2004, and have been here ever since.
Yep. Wonderful, wonderful. And then in terms of the recent career, I know you've gone on to run divisions for JP Morgan in Europe, and also be an advocate there as well for I suppose customer obsession and really that sort of passion for customers.
Yeah, so my move here to Ireland in 2004, I worked for RBS, had a great role at RBS, and you know, the bubble was inflating there in terms of the Celtic Tiger, and then when it burst, kind of in the late noughties, I took a great role that really took me back to my merchant acquiring and payments roots with AIB Merchant Services. We set up the corporate sales division within AIBMS, one of Ireland's and certainly Europe's most successful payment processors at the time. And I was there for around 6 years, always again on the merchant acquiring side. And then I decided in 2016 to move to First Data, or now Fiserv, which was the mothership. Had great, so I'd about 10 years in total with the First Data Fiserv family before moving to JP Morgan, just right at the very start of COVID, to lead their international growth and expansion agenda. And JP Morgan was a great experience. So being able to operate across multiple divisions. So the JP Morgan Payments organization is a combination of trade finance, it's merchant acquiring, it's treasury services and liquidity, along with commercial card as well under that payments badge and banner. And I guess, you know, for me, Adrian, you know, looking at what we had achieved in JP Morgan and at Fiserv as well, what was abundantly clear to me is I'd always been in that merchant acquiring space, but actually merchant acquiring on its own, if I look towards the future, I feel the industry is shifting and pivoting where merchant acquiring on its own is just not enough anymore. It needs to be that embedded solution around payments, about sending and receiving and making a payment. So JP Morgan gave me an opportunity to dip my toe into the broader payments water, of which Flexco has allowed me to do as well. So quite a broad and diverse background, but one thing is absolutely centre to that is that payments piece.
Absolutely, absolutely. Wonderful, wonderful. Now, Obviously, the other component for us that really matters for payments is about leadership. And
Yeah.
obviously, you've just naturally moved up the ranks and up the escalator in many ways to end up as an MD and now as a CEO. And I wonder if you could tell us, though, a bit about leadership. And I have a belief that leadership starts with self-leadership. Yet you also take that further and say, actually, before self-leadership, it starts with self-care. So I wonder if
Mm.
you could tell us more about that.
Yeah, so I'm deeply passionate about payments and people, right? And I think that's one of my strap lines there on the LinkedIn badge that I have. And always been deeply passionate about trying to make sure that people look after themselves, right? Self-awareness is key and critical, but like you say, self-care is as well. And I suppose over the years, Adrian, I became less proficient myself in terms of that self-care aspect, right? And I think maybe the question to pose to you, right? If at the age of 18, you were told that the car that you drive today would need to last you the rest of your life, right? If that was the case, you'd definitely look after it. You'd fill it with quality fuel. You'd service it regularly. And I guess if you heard a rattle, you wouldn't turn up the radio. You'd get it fixed. And for me, I suppose when my kids left home a number of years ago, I kind of replaced a little bit of the void that they left in my life with work, and as a result, became incredibly focused, incredibly passionate about pursuing my career and having as much impact as I possibly could. And then a few years ago, I looked around at various different webinars, various different panel sessions or events that I attended. And the person up on stage, Adrian, I didn't recognize that person, right? And it wasn't an age thing, right? I swear to you, it wasn't an age thing. It was more around who that person had morphed into. It was somebody that perhaps maybe lacked the confidence they had many years ago. It was somebody that perhaps maybe looked a lot different. And when I talk about, the visual changes that I'd gone through over the last number of years, as I say, I didn't recognize the person I had become. And as a result, I found that I perhaps maybe shied away from different events, different opportunities. I perhaps maybe took a little bit of a nosedive in terms of that confidence aspect I'd
Mm,
always been so strong in.
yeah.
Going through the menopause as well. Can we mention the menopause? It's a kind of still a little bit of a taboo word. But hitting the menopause is a really good opportunity for you to self-reflect. And that's
Mm,
exactly what I did. And here I am a couple of years later, very different in terms of how I look. But more importantly, I think, I'm a much stronger person and a much stronger
yeah.
leader as a result of that journey that I traveled personally on a personal level. And I think, Adrian, I've always been involved in business transformation, sales transformation, organizational transformation. But I think for me, one of the key areas and key successes is probably my own personal transformation over the last
Mm.
2-3 years or so.
Well, firstly, thank you very much indeed for sharing that. I wonder if we could go a little bit deeper on that, if that's okay with you. In terms of the sort of self-reflections, as you say, you were looking at that person on stage. What 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 was it that what reflective process did you go through to to come out? Obviously, as an advisor and coach myself, this is something that as payments
Yeah.
leaders advisor, that's exactly what we do. We help leaders to stop, to say, hey, look, what's happening? So what? What next? Where can you explore with this? And again, some leaders don't want to look in the mirror there. And it takes I commend you for a level of bravery there. So I wonder if you could tell us a bit more about that.
Yeah, so as I say, it wasn't just a physical thing. I suppose for me over the last number of years, I found that I'd invested so much time and effort into others, right? Trying to
Mm,
give back, trying to support the next generation of leaders coming through. And I suppose it's a stark realization that maybe you don't practice what you preach. I think that
mm,
was
mm,
that was something that a very dear friend of mine said to me. So that was one element, and then another element. I think I'd completed probably another 18-hour shift, because my role in JP Morgan was, it was a fantastic role, and I loved it, and we achieved some amazing things there. But when you manage and you have responsibility for people and operations and clients across the Asia Pacific region, across the EMEA region, and indeed the Latin American market, and a whole heap of colleagues that are based maybe out on the west coast of the US as well, your body clock completely goes to pot. And I think, trying to manage that was one element. Another element was COVID. We talked about pivoting and shifting to working from home. I think for me, Adrian, during that period, I didn't work from home. I lived at work. And I think all the time your career is progressing, all the time that you're achieving great results and you're having a significant impact on the areas that you're responsible for, you kind of put yourself to the bottom of the list, assuming you're on the list at all. And I think the real come to Jesus moment for me was, as mentioned, I'd put in another 18-hour shift with work, and we were managing some pretty key projects and initiatives at the time. And I'd taken possession of a new car. And as I was driving that car home, I pranged it. And it wasn't serious, and there wasn't too much damage done other than my pride, I think, and obviously the fear of trying to getting home and telling my husband I've pranged the new car. And I phoned my daughter, my eldest daughter, on the way home from work, because I needed a bit of company just to keep me company on the journey home. And she got a little upset, and she said to me, "Mum, what are you doing?" And I was like, "How do you mean?" And she said, "Mum, like, if you, God forbid, but if you died tomorrow, JP Morgan, your employer would replace you like that. It might take 3 months or 6 months to find the right candidate, but I can't replace you as a mum." And I suppose that was the moment, Adrian's getting a little deep now, but that was the moment for me where I just thought, geez, what example am I setting to my kids? What example am I setting to those around me? And unless I live by the values around self-care and becoming really self-aware, then, to be honest with you, I feel a little bit of a fraud. So to my point, seeing that person on stage talking about all the things that they're so deeply passionate about, those topics around, supporting people, making sure that you get the right balance in life, making sure that you do look after yourself. If I wasn't living by those rules, then it was time to take stock and change. And the whole menopause thing, you think about things a little bit differently, right? And I suppose that, for me, the last 2 to 3 years has been a journey of self-growth, but also more self-awareness.
Well, I'd just like to take this opportunity to thank you for sharing something very deep and personal with us. And from my perspective, I just think integrity is really important, as in living your values and your deeds and your words matching. And that aha moment there for you, that sounds quite profound.
It was right, Adrian. And one other thing that I'll say to you, I suppose, and I don't think this is solely and exclusively linked to being a female, but the reality is that the industry is quite unforgiving, right? And any sign of vulnerability that you may show, certainly for me over the last 25, 30 years, is a sign of weakness. And as a managing director in JP Morgan, or as a CEO of an international payments organization, there is an expectation that you've got all your shit together. Sorry now for that, but there is that expectation that you have everything together, and to put your hand up and admit and say, "My name is Sara Savidge," and actually, do you know what? Things aren't quite going to plan on a personal level. I think is a bit of a milestone, and when you hit that and you take control of it, I think the impact thereafter can be quite profound. And traveling that journey not only makes me a much stronger individual, a much stronger leader, but also allows me to maybe compartmentalize my life in ways that I hadn't done before. Because as a woman in payments, I've always tried to be the best leader, the best parent, the best, partner, the best colleague, the best manager, the best confidant, and do the very best for clients as well. But actually, unless you're sitting on that list of being able to focus on yourself, it's very hard for you to deliver all of those things. And I think, again, as a woman in payments, we talk about being invincible, being able to strive to be all of those things that I've just described. The reality is I don't believe that you can absolutely have it all, but maybe not just at the very same time.
It's a very good way of describing that. You can have it all, but not at the same time. Just to share with you from my perspective, or from our perspective, what we advise. Actually, one of the reasons we are in the payments industry, we enjoy the payments industry, because I think it's far more collaborative than many others.
Yeah.
And the truth is, leaders who show a level of vulnerability are very privileged with the leaders we work with, but and they show humanity, and they actually create deeper connection, and a connection beyond task, because it can be very easy to just create within and only focus on task. So actually, I think there's more than a place for that in the industry. It's actually a route to better relationships, better connections, and actually better results, better
Yes.
performance, which is what we're very passionate about. So thank you deeply for sharing that with us. I wonder if we could just broaden that subject a bit to just look at the impact and the positive impacts diversity can have, because we see diversity and inclusion can have a mixed response across business in many ways, and it can look like it's a nice to have. I'm particularly interested in in the results and the impact this can positively have on business. And I know how much experience and passion you've got for that. So I wonder if you could share that with us.
Yeah, so I guess sitting on the advisory board for the Women in Payments community, so we have over 50,000 members dotted in every corner across the international landscape. I suppose when I think about how the industry has evolved, Adrian, when I first started in payments many moons ago, I was one of a handful of women in a team of 100 guys.
Yeah.
And it was just the way it was, right? It was just the way it was. And you accepted that. I didn't feel excluded. I genuinely didn't. I didn't feel ostracized. I didn't feel as if at the time that, perhaps maybe I'd have different opportunities, or maybe not as many opportunities, because the opportunities were there for everybody. You just had to put yourself forward for them. But I did notice over the last 25 years or so that, maybe different opportunities come your way if you're a guy, or you identify as male in the industry versus females. And I think a lot of that is because us females at various different events, and this is how Women in Payments really started all those years ago, is there was naturally at various different events, whether it was ICE, whether it was, Money 2020, didn't matter what event or forum or community it was, you tended to look out amongst a sea of suits, right? And it was, always the same type of demographic. And then over to the side, you'd find this group of women. And we would naturally congregate. We would naturally support each other. And so many of my industry friends I met all those years ago, and they were in payments doing exactly the same gig as what I was doing at the time. And our careers have evolved and changed over the last number of years. But we naturally supported each other. If we heard a role was coming up, we would naturally advocate for those people, connect people, right? So all these forums like Women in Payments, Women in FinTech, Women in Banking, Women in Treasury, what they've done is they've created that proper community, a formal community where people can go for that support rather than relying on the goodwill and perhaps maybe openness of various different individuals within the industry. And I think now when I look at DE&I as an agenda across the payments landscape and the ecosystem, to be honest with you, Adrian, I'd love to get to a point where we stop talking about DE&I, right? Where we stop talking about diversity and inclusion and equity, because everyone is treated the same, irrespective of their background. And diversity is so much more than just male and female, right? It's different thoughts. It's diversity of background. It's diversity of education, diversity of age and demographic. These are all the things that I think the payments industry has today that even if I was to go back 10 years ago, really didn't have. And for me, it's around the intentionality of the DE&I agenda. It's not a tick in the box. I remember when I accepted the role and started in JP Morgan, somebody that I had worked with for a number of years pinged me and said, congratulations, this is a fantastic tick in the box for JP Morgan. And I was kind of like thinking, hold on a second here.
Whoa,
Is it
whoa.
not? Yeah, is it not because of the impact that I've had across the industry over
Yeah,
the
yeah.
last 25 years or so? Because JP Morgan is incredibly diverse, right? It really is. But the challenge sometimes that we find in the industry, Adrian, is that there are so many trailblazing women that operate in the payments ecosystem today at various different roles and various different levels. But as you go up the chain in terms of seniority, the pool becomes a little shallower.
Yeah.
So by the time you get to the larger roles, the CEOs, the managing directors, those that can really drive and affect change and lead significant, have significant responsibility, because the pool is a little bit shallow, the choice isn't always there. So what I deeply committed to, along with the Women in Payments agenda and some of the other forums and communities that I'm passionate and proud to be part of, is trying to make sure that that pool gets deeper and deeper and deeper as time continues, so that when organizations are looking for the right candidate, they don't look for a female or for a male. What they do is they look for the right person to feed the role. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. No, it's fascinating, and a really good response from you in terms of was it not my results that actually, I think it's my results that got me here. And as
He
you
was
say,
just sour. He was just sour.
yeah. But I think that's the important thing, is to say actually that the caliber of people reaching that bar is the single most important thing. But I I think the industry that we serve is so diverse. So almost if we don't have cognitive diversity and think different at different people's backgrounds, that includes gender, that includes social class, that includes all sorts of ethnic backgrounds, etc. If we don't understand that, there are sectors that we simply won't be able to engage with.
And that's a really good point, right? So if you think about, if I go back, to when I started selling the PDQs for Barclays back in the late 90s, right? So very rarely, very, very rarely would any of my decision makers, the buying demographic, they all tended to be guys, right? So head of treasury, head of finance, they all tended to be male. Whereas now, if you look, the buying demographic has completely shifted in the last 10 years, right? You will have decision makers within global organizations, and when they bring out the payments team, not only is it diverse, in many cases, it's led by females, right? And that is because I think having that mix, and a lot of the most successful organizations, certainly that I've worked with and I've worked for, have that diversity within the payments, within the payments remit that they have within the organization. Certain roles like HR, maybe marketing, they tended to be, more dominated by females, but certain other segments like finance, for example, like technology is another example, the STEM community as well, you didn't see as many females. Whereas now, when I look around and I go to an event, I see a sea of color, I see a sea of background, of ages, demographic. And as I say, that male and female element is just one very small part. It's all underrepresented groups that we, I suppose, as an industry, really need to do better at driving change across.
Excellent. Can I share something with you about mindset that I've noticed? There's a senior leader in the industry that said to me once that he made two observations. He said to me, you can't do much in the payments industry on your own, even if you're the world's largest bank. Given the four-party model and various other things, at least, you really can't do much on your own. So I thought that was interesting. But the next point he made, he said, look, given the industry as well, it drives collaboration. And I said, why does it drive collaboration? He said, well, look, today we could be partners. Tomorrow we could be competitors. Then we could actually be on the same bid team together, etc., etc. So he said, I'm convinced it drives a different, frankly, more he described it as a mindset of dexterity, because you need to be agile and adaptive, depending on whom you're speaking to at various points during a week. Any thoughts on that?
Yes, there's no better industry, I think, to describe kind of co-opetition. That's probably one of the ways and I use a phrase quite often is, you know, in the payments industry, you run with the hare and you hunt with the hounds. Okay. In the fact that, you know, some organizations, if I think back to, you know, say my Fiserv days where, you know, we had a number of, say, ISOs, referral partners that would work with us, and we would onboard their merchants, and we would provide the infrastructure that they needed to be able to sell merchant services across their ecosystem. And then in time, they became payment facilitators. And then in time, they got their own principal scheme license, right, with Visa and MasterCard, and they became an acquirer in their own right. And then they continued to evolve to provide ISO, PFAC, and then payments as a service. And those organizations, you know, a few spring to mind here. You know, those organizations, some of them are less than 10 years of age. And they've gone through that complete cycle of being a startup to a scale up, obtaining their license and obtaining your own licenses and operating your own payments infrastructure. Like, that's no small feat, right? It really isn't. And to be able to then go head to head with some of the world's biggest processors of payments, like First Data and JP Morgan, you know, it's really inspiring to see. And I don't think there are any other industries that can provide that type of growth model. And then you talked, Adrian, around, you know, about doing things on your own. The organizations that I've witnessed the strongest and most prominent growth over the last 25 years or so are those that put a big emphasis on partnerships. Now, those partnerships may start just as a, you know, as a simple referral partnership, or perhaps maybe providing a solution or filling a gap that somebody that needs at that particular point in time. But as the payments partnership tends to evolve, it becomes core infrastructure, it becomes distribution channels, it becomes that next generation. And if I look at some of the topics coming through, like AI, you look at embedded banking, you look at open banking, you know, consumer adoption, these are all the things now that are really driving change. And for any organization, whether you are the world's biggest processor of payments, or perhaps maybe just a startup coming up with a great idea for the next generation of payments, the reality is if you try to do everything yourself, one, it will be fiercely expensive, but secondly, you will still be working through the design of what needs to be developed before that first cycle has completed, right? And the challenge that you have here is that unless you keep up with the trends, unless you're there being proactive in an industry that is consistently changing, you'll be left behind. And I think that's one thing I love. People often say to me, you've been in the payments industry for the last 25 years or so. My goodness, you know, would you not like to have tried your hand, or, you know, perhaps maybe attempted, you know, working in something else? And the answer is no, because I don't think there's any other industry that has evolved, changed, and pivoted so much than payments.
Yeah. No, I can only agree. And particularly in the last decade. So obviously, one of the key things is to, you talk about having an impact on others, people's careers, etc. Be fascinated to hear who's been most influential in your career as it's evolved during the various organizations that you've worked for and the various roles that you've had.
Yeah, so I've been blessed over the last 25, 30 years or so to work for some pretty amazing leaders, right? For me, I need to be inspired by the leadership group where I work. And I think that's been one thing for me. So I know what good leadership looks like, but also on the flip side of that, I know what poor leadership looks like as well. And I think everybody you work for and you work with, you take little snippets of greatness from them. You learn what to do and perhaps maybe what not to do. But everyone that you work with gives you an opportunity for self-growth and development. In terms of kind of the influences, I those that have either been on panel sessions with me or listened to other conversations, I have two pictures here. It's a shame my camera doesn't flip round, right, Adrian? I have two pictures. One is of Grace Hopper, and the other is of Jurgen Klopp. And whether you're a Liverpool fan or not, you have to admit that Jurgen Klopp now is pretty inspirational there in terms of leadership. You know, what he's achieved, what he had achieved with a team that was a good team, but it wasn't a great team, right? He didn't have bucket loads of cash, but he still managed to pivot and change,
Mm.
the fan base, get us back up to the top of the table and get some silverware in the cupboard as well, which is hugely important. And then, as I say, Grace Hopper, if you don't know who she is, Google her. She's the reason we've got a laptop. And if I think back to that impact that they had in their own particular lines of discipline.
Mm.
So Grace Hopper being a Navy admiral in World War II, and a computer programmer, I can't even begin to imagine, how stereotypical, females were back in wartime, right? And the fact that if she's the smartest woman in the room, she was, cracking code, creating an environment to
Mm.
build that first supercomputer. And then the legacy that she's had across the STEM industry thereafter, and it continues. Obviously, she's passed on a number of years ago, but her legacy remains. And then for me with Jurgen Klopp, one thing that really resonates with me is his message and his mission is about belief, right? And all he asked for the fan base and for the players
Mm.
back when he took over a number of years ago was to believe. And that's believe in yourself, believe in the club, believe in what is capable.
Mm.
They've both been pretty inspirational and influential for me, in recent times. And as I say, I think also, thinking back to my own kids, I have two daughters. Both are absolutely, kicking butt in the industries that they work in. Neither of them are in payments, but both of them are really strong, independent women. But do you know what? They have a better perspective than what
Mm.
I did many years ago, and a very different landscape to learn and grow from
Wow.
as well.
Wow. Wow. So with Grace Hopper, what isn't that a famous quote of hers about relating to change? That
Yeah, yeah. So one, and I'm look sure plagiarism is desperately underrated, right, Adrian? But change is not an event, right?
yeah,
It's a process.
yeah.
And that is one. I know my FexCode team will look and they'll raise their eyes as they hear me say it again here on this podcast. But and it's one that's literally sat with me for the
Mm.
last number of years. A lot of times when you're looking at business change, organizational change, and generally driving change in whatever facet is needed, sometimes you can
Mm.
become a little frustrated if it doesn't happen overnight. And I think that phrase is around making sure that you acknowledge that it is going to be a process, but it's baby steps. Every single step, every single event, every single change that you can impact or you can drive will have an end result. And it's being able to focus on what the goal is at the end, the journey that you want to get on. Again, I think there's a song, right? It's something like it's the climb. The journey is
Yeah, yeah,
important,
yeah.
right? Really, really important. But getting to the top of that mountain, driving that change is one thing, but it's what you learn on the journey in between.
Absolutely. No, it's fascinating for me because I'm not a don't really watch football at all, but obviously I'm a complete payments and also leader geek. And it couldn't help but my abiding memories of Klopp are, press conference, those huge smiling teeth and that huge smiling face
Yes.
and having fun. But I've never seen anything like this from a manager of any sport. The connection on that last game when he walked
Yeah.
around and I know he's fist bumping or whatever with them, but to have that connection with the fans
Yeah.
was truly, truly incredible. And I think leadership starts there for us. We
Yeah.
do a lot of work, obviously, in our business, facilitating change or being the facilitators of change. Obviously, we work with the business, but we're not in the business.
Yeah.
And to me, that always starts with connection because the next thing after connection is trust. When you've got trust with your team, you've got to
It is.
start to make some change. But if you go back to connection first, and the number of leaders we've worked with who we've shown them how to create connection, human connection, not business connection, human connection with people. So I deeply admire that. I wonder if you could just distinguish between a couple of things. I remember on our pre-call, we were talking about a couple of differences between the difference between somebody who can influence your career, somebody who's a mentor, um, somebody who is your line manager, somebody who's a sponsor.
Yeah.
I wonder if you could just, because that's been, you said, vital for you to navigate that throughout your career.
Yeah, so there will always be lots of different people that influence your career wherever you are on the ladder, right? Whether you're just fresh out of college and you're starting the first, taking the first step, and right the way through to, those that are close to retirement and everything in between. And I think if I look back across my career, and certainly as part of the support I try to provide for others, is there are four key influences. I believe there are four key influences within your career, right? The first one really and truly is your role model. So I'm not going to labor the point on Liverpool again, right? But having individuals that you aspire to or have particular
Yeah,
skill sets or attributes that you really think are admirable, right? So that's the first thing, having those role models, and then defining what it is about them that really inspires you. So that's the first one. The second one then is your coach, right? So this is generally your line manager. It's the person that tells you to run faster, kick the ball this way. That was great, but that wasn't great. You need to try harder. You need to do better. So this is somebody, it can be your family members, it's often your partner, but more often not in a workplace environment. It's your peers and it's your line manager. The next one is a mentor. I was blessed very early on to be allocated a number of mentors. First started at Barclays. I didn't really know how to use or leverage them, but I was fortunate in the fact that it wasn't her first rodeo, right? So she was able to give me a lot of guidance and really getting the most out of a mentor. And the thing with a mentor can often get confused with the coach, right? Because a mentor really and truly is about bringing the magic out from within you. So it's somebody that can lift and inspire you to grow, but with your own ideas, with your own mindset, with your own, I guess your own perspectives in life, and being able to bring those to the surface. So it's somebody that almost lights a fire beneath you, but
yeah, yeah,
allows you to grow it yourself. Whereas the coach, essentially, he or she will be telling you do this, do that, the other. Whereas the mentor is around what would you do, right? And
yeah, yeah.
and and,
Very
and there's
familiar.
a
Yeah.
yeah, and there's a fine line, and sometimes those two can get confused. And then the final one is around a sponsor. So again, sometimes people get confused between a sponsor and a mentor. And a sponsor, the best way I can describe it, somebody that talks about you when you're not there, right? Somebody in the room,
Yeah, absolutely.
when asked a question, or perhaps maybe is intentionally advocating for you. I know certainly, in JP Morgan and in Fiserv and here in Fexco as well, those types of organizations, having sponsors within the organization can be the difference between, being able to have the right platform and the right
Yeah,
profile to secure that next promotion. And I think we generally, even as leaders, we can get quite confused between those four things, because actually, your mentor might be, and it certainly was for me, was also a role model, right? Everything that she did,
mm,
I looked at her and my God, she's completely got all her shit together, which is great, right? But actually she was guiding me. And 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 when you look at it, she was also advocating for me when I wasn't around
yes, yeah,
as
yeah.
well. And
Advocacy is
so there
key.
is a fine line, and they do cross over at
Mm,
times. But my guidance to anybody, no matter where they are in their career, is to identify who those people are in those individual categories, knowing that maybe they do cross over. But
mm,
if you know who they are, it's really important that you manage that relationship with them based on the category that they sit within. So, with a mentor, you might talk to them about a hideous day or a hideous experience that you may well have had. Whereas actually, the sponsor, you probably don't want to share everything with
yeah,
them, right? Because
exactly.
you want to stay up on that pedestal. So it is quite difficult. And what I try to impart with everybody that I work with is by knowing who these people are within those categories can really help. And then on the flip side, Adrian, as well, that mentorship piece, I don't know whether the people who I've worked with over the years and still have relationships with on that mentoring relationship, the value as a mentor that you get back by a really strong and positive, mutually beneficial relationship as a mentor and a mentee is fundamental. So, because I'm knocking around in the payments industry for so long, it's really important that me as an individual, as a payments geek, and as a leader, I'm still connected with the next generation that's coming
Absolutely.
through,
Yeah.
right? And if I look at that generation that's coming through now, the leaders of the future, they're going to be so much better than what I ever could be, right? Or anybody else in this, in a senior leadership role now, because they've got the benefit of our perspective, because people are more inclined to share and support and advocate and sponsor, but they've also got their own take on it as well.
Absolutely, of course. Yeah.
So the biggest challenge sometimes I see within mentorship is that sometimes mentors smother mentees with the way that they would do it.
Yeah, no.
And that's not what we need. We need new ideas coming through, because essentially what's been tried and tested before throughout my career, it's not where we're going, right? We're going forward, and we need people to have that forward growth mindset, learn from all the mistakes that we, us oldies, have made in the industry, but make sure that they are strong enough to bring out their own ideas and perspective. That's fundamental for us as an industry.
I couldn't agree with that more. And while some of the terms are slightly different for me, the mentor stroke coach one, for me, I think the real skill of mentors is the ability to elicit, high performance out of an individual based on their terms, rather than, okay, let me tell you what I did. Now that's didactic learning, and that's teacher to pupil. Actually, some of the people a lot of younger people I mentor, I'm often stunned by their sheer ideas, their development, and you just think, whoa, let the horse run on that one. So I think we could talk about this one a lot. I know we have in the past as well. So I wonder if we could just move to the future then, because that just seems a good place that we were talking about there. What do you see as the big changes or the opportunity? There's huge innovation within the industry. Where do you see the payments industry going over the next sort of 24 months or so, next 2 years?
If I think back, 10 years ago, the fastest way to send money from, say, the UK to New York, as an example, was to physically draw it in cash, stick it on a plane in a suitcase, and deliver it in person, right? If you think about how much the industry has changed in the last 10 years, the next 3 to 4 are going to be even more significant and impactful. I think Visa quoted there last year at one of their industry events, that there's been more change in the last 5 years in payments than really and truly we've seen in the last 25 years. If I look forward, to have a crystal ball, Adrian, right? But if I look forward, it has to be an environment where consumers continue to drive change. Historically, if I look back, it was always businesses and organizations and payment providers had a solution, and consumers and businesses had to fit in, right? These are the model, these are the arrangements, this is how you conform. Whereas now it's very much consumer driven, it's very much business driven. What the business needs, they either find a provider that can deliver it for them, or they build something. So you take orchestration, right? So it's all a very, very, very hot buzzword right now. But the reality is orchestration. Payments organizations have been orchestrating for the last number of years. It didn't have a title, right? But being able to switch traffic for business continuity, or for contingency, or perhaps maybe for price or performance, has been there for the last number of years. But actually now, organizations, e-commerce, companies really now have taken that to say, well, actually, I want to control where my payments go. And if I have a bad experience here, or there's some downtime or an outage, or the transactions are costing more, I want to be able to dynamically route elsewhere. So orchestration, I think, will continue to evolve. And I think, if I look at our own organization as Fexco Payments, we serve around 1/3 of the cruise industry right now with a payments orchestration solution. And if I think about how we created that, it was because existing clients of ours had a problem that nobody else in the industry could solve. So being the innovators in the industry that we are, we kind of put our heads together. We've got our greatest people to pull them together to build an orchestration layer and platform that allows the cruise industry to route to multiple different acquirers, different providers, local alternative methods of payments, to be able to have that choice. So I think the first one is about choice and being able to serve an industry with market leading solutions. And if the providers don't have them in place today, the chances are somebody will create that And in 2 to 3 years' time, they could potentially be leading the market. I think AI is another one. Again, everyone's talking about AI. At the minute we had an event. I co-hosted an event with a number of different providers there a couple of weeks ago here in Dublin and in Galway. And we talked about the impact that AI is having across different sectors and industries, and being able to use and leverage data. So all organizations, no matter what line of business or industry you're in today, Adrian, all businesses have an obscene amount of data, and being able to take that data and turn it into something meaningful is really tough, is really hard. And I think where AI will really help the payments industry is by turning that into gold. And I think, there's a number of providers out there in the industry that are really starting to take that, run with it, and have tangible impact, real P&L impact, customer impact, efficiency impact as well. So that's another one. And the last piece, if I can predict, is the partnership element, right? So all payment providers and organizations at the moment, they have a choice. They build, they buy, or they partner. If they build, they run the risk of missing the boat completely. If they buy, you've obviously got significant cost, and also you've got to be absolutely certain that what you're investing in is going to deliver what's needed today, but in the future as well. Partnerships provides an opportunity for organizations of all sizes to be able to keep up with trends and allow them to specialize and keep delivering in the area of specialism, right? So it's really hard in the payments industry to be all things to all people. So know your strengths, know where you can really add value as an organization, and find partners that can help deliver that combined benefit for the companies or the partners or the consumers that you want to serve.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, Sarah, this has been a real, I feel like, sort of all be around the ecosystem in terms of projections, but also in terms of deep humanity there as well with leadership. This is normally where I sort of summarize and come up with some sort of 2 or 3 sort of salient points, but I've got a lot more than 3. So I wonder if I could just summarize what I've heard today and that this most stood out. Yeah. Would that be okay?
Of course, fire away.
I think the first thing is, and again, I've always found your journey very inspiring. The fact that you started by stuffing envelopes and ultimately ended up as an MD and then a CEO. I think it shows what's possible, and obviously your attitude and your approach and your advocacy has been a huge component of that. But I think that's you've shown that it's possible, and I think the other piece for me then has been your passion. Obviously comes through from a customer perspective. So when you are passionate about being customer driven, then that's only that's a leading light, and it's a possibility, and it's great advice for anybody. Thank you very much indeed for sharing your very personal experience about leadership, and that link between to lead others, you need to lead yourself, and to lead yourself, you do need to have a self-awareness, and that can start with a level of self-care. And so stopping, reflecting, and actually looking at sometimes those who love you around you, saying, "Hey, this is an opportunity for some self-awareness," because everybody benefits from that. There's 4 wins going on there. I think a common theme has undoubtedly been about change and about how the industry is very collaborative, but actually change is a process. It's not just a one-off event, and it evolves and it develops. I think the other piece that really stood out for me was about whom can influence you. That's people we never meet, but but then those who also. But I think particularly what stood out today was for me, I love that 4-part model that you have about the difference between who's a role model for you, who's actually a coach, who's a mentor, and also who's a sponsor. I think so many people don't get the distinction between who's a mentor and who's an actual sponsor, because that sponsor can make the difference to your career. And I love the way you described that they are in the room giving you advocacy when you're not in the room. That can lead to promotion, that can lead to exciting projects that you wouldn't have otherwise worked on. And that's a huge area for us in how we advise a lot of our clients. And I think then the other piece is then coming back to what about the future? Well, the future is things aren't going to get any slower in the payments industry. But
No,
those three elements you brought out there, it's going to be led by choice. It's going to be led by consumer and business choice and business need. Um, AI is obviously going to have a significant impact, and those who combine the use of using their data to the most effective element are going to have an advantage. But also, I think to sum it all up, payments and partner, they both start with a P, but partnerships, but they're embedded in the process there. So they were my key takeaways of why diversity, and we're in a diverse industry serving diverse people. So we have to not just include others, but it costs people business when they don't.
it does. It does. It really does. And look, just one thing that I'd like to close on, right, as we come to the end here, Adrian. I think as a leader in the payments industry, right, there's one thing that really shines through for me. Somebody said it to me many moons ago. When you're on an aeroplane and they're doing the safety announcement to make sure that you pay attention to the cabin crew, and they talk about, the life jacket and
Yep.
all this kind
Yep.
of thing. There's one thing they talk about is that when the oxygen, if
Yep.
there's a problem with the oxygen, the mask drops down. And the very first thing that you need to do is you need to secure your own mask before
Yep.
tending to others. Took me a little while to realize that, right? My natural reaction is to make sure that those around me were always okay. And look, as a result, it was a little bit of a blip for me, but blip is over. My mask is definitely on.
Sure.
But just, once you've got your own mask secured, you can then tend and make sure that you're supporting others as well. So just make sure that mask is on nice and secure.
Well, it's a wonderful place to end our conversation today. I can't thank you enough. I knew our conversation would flow wonderfully. So thank you very much indeed. I really appreciate it.
It's my pleasure, Adrian. Look forward to seeing you at the next event.
Absolutely.
Take care. Many thanks indeed.